last time we started with the React folder structure there, and I explained what some of the files that we have there are doing, uh, starting from the node modules there, which is where the node keep all the library that you're using for this particular project there. So public, this is where you keep all the assets that you want to make it available publicly there like that. So if you want to make it available to people outside, you can just go to the URL, type the slash, or whatever the name of the file, they can type the stuff or the folder. Everything you put inside the public, it's accessible to everybody from the URL there. But if you have some assets you just want to use in your project, but it's not going to be accessible to the world through the URL, then you keep everything under these assets. And this source is the one that hold all the source, like the SRC is just source. So all your code, everything are going to be inside this. So it's not a must that you put inside the source, but for the organization's sake of your project, so you put everything inside this SRC. And if you look at it, before this SRC of a thing, there are some other files here that we don't really need right now, like this ESLint, the git ignore, and so forth like that. We don't really need all this one. The one we actually need here, because this HTML here, you won't be touching it, but I already explained what is going on with the file, because everything you want to show on the page needs HTML. So the React will connect to this HTML and put whatever it needs to put inside this div here. And that's the reason why you see that there's a single script here, which is connected to the main.jsx, which is inside the source. So if you open the source, you see the file there. And this file is the one that is connecting your React code to the browser out there, which is React DOM, which is a document object model, is the one that manages all the changes on the page there, but it has the way you used to do it. Nothing concerned about what is going on behind the scene. You only just to give it what you want to show on the screen, and it's going to put it wherever you want it to be put there. And as you can see, it's calling this app here. And where is app coming from, as you can see, is something that is coming from this app.jsx. So if you go to the app.jsx, what is here? What we actually have there is that we are exporting out something. What are we exporting out? We're exporting out this app. And what is app? App is just this function here. And this function is what we refer to as a functional component, which is what I mentioned last time. I talk about component. A component is a way of you describing the elements that you have on the page there. So for example, you have a site, your site is containing the header, your site is containing the main section, or it's containing card. Each one of these items there are what we refer to as component. A component is just a reusable block of UI that you have on your page. And this UI now, or the component, you can use it in different places on your page. Just like the way we normally do the normal HTML, like if you have some items you need to use again, what do? You duplicate the HTML and you change the content. But here we don't duplicate the HTML. What you do is you use component, you duplicate component. And the advantage of that one is that your component, it always represents a unit on a side there. And that unit can be reused in different places. And if there's any changes, you only go to the source code, like where you define the unit, you change it, and anywhere you're using the component, all of them are going to take the changes instantly. Not like the normal HTML that you're doing the copy and paste yourself. If you make any changes to the first one, you have to go to the other one and make changes too. But with component, it's just an isolated function that is returning the UI that you want to display on the screen there. And what do I mean by UI? So inside this return here, whatever you return back, that's what React is going to send to the page for user to see. So how do we put this in practice? Let's just start with it by I'm not in the correct folder right now. So let me enter this React. So open in integrated terminal, and let me close all this other one that are not related, because you have to be inside the correct folder before you can run anything. Don't forget, we've talked about all this one where we're dealing with terminal. So whatever command you are running from here, it will run from the current folder you are working on there. And since we want to run our project, we need to be inside the folder that holds the project, because everything you want to do has to be on the React. You can't do anything outside of this React folder. It's not more that it is React, or it can be any name you want there. But currently here, I'm using React. As you can see, it's inside that particular folder. And how do you run your server? I've explained it before. Is by using the npm run dev. So where am I getting this thing from? If you go back to the package.json here, you see there's some script there. We have the dev script, we have the build script, we have the links, and we have the preview one. But the one we need is the dev, because we want to run our development environment. And why are we using development environment? Because if we make any changes to our code, we want to see the changes live, not that if you make any changes you have to build again. Because when you use build, this one, anytime you make changes you have to build, and it's not something that will just give you within a second. But with the dev environment, it will just act as if you are running the site live, but you can still change anything you want on it, and you're going to see the changes instantly there, like that, just like the way it is from the former stuff that we used to use, live server. But this one is even more advanced than live server, because it doesn't reload your page like that. What you do is to change whatever the content you change, and that particular area, that's what is going to modify, not that it has to reload the entire page like that. So if you run the dev, it's going to spin up the Vite engine, the tools that we are using, and it's going to build our application. But the building is for development, and it's going to start the server. And once the server started here, you can now use the address that is going to give to you here. As you can see, the Vite is going to start, and as you can see, in order for you to see your site, just click on the link, or you press O from this side, and it's going to open it up in the browser there, like that. So what are we showing? We are showing our content, and this content we are showing here is coming from a particular file. It's coming from this app.jsx. And where are we getting all this thing from? They are coming from anything that you return from your function. So any function that is returning a JSX code, they are referred to as components. Component is just a reusable block of area that you have on the page. It might not be something that you are going to reuse in different places, but we use component to kind of represent the element or the UI that we want to show for the user on the screen. As you can see, this is the UI here, which is coming from this app.jss. But in React, we have two ways of creating a component, but I only focus on this functional one. We have other way by using the class component, but we not really talk about class at all. So I won't even go to that because that's old React project. Is when you're dealing with maybe React in 20, let's just say maybe around that 2019 backward. That's where you are going to be seeing class component. But these days, what you always work with is a functional component. And what is functional component? A functional component is just a function that is returning a JSX code. And what is JSX? JSX is just a JavaScript extension, which means it's something that make it easier for you to incorporate HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together. Because if you look at it here now, this one is not normal HTML. Here, what is going on here is not normal HTML. This is what we call JSX. If you look at it now, what they are typing here is class name. But by the time you get to the browser, it will change it to class. You know, we don't, everything that we're talking about, there's something like class name. But here you cannot use that word class because it have meanings to JavaScript. So since it have meanings to JavaScript, they now come with another name to represent class there. Because here you can't just say class. If you say class, JavaScript will complain here that can you see now? It's complaining already because class is doing something else in JavaScript and it will not represent that HTML. And whatever you are doing here is not pure HTML. What you are doing here is JSX. Then the tooling will now convert everything that you have here to a proper HTML that you are going to see on the page. And that's why this one is not HTML, even though it looks like HTML there like that, but it's not HTML. This is JSX, which is this one here, which from you can see from the extension. It is a JSX, which is just JavaScript. The JSX is just JavaScript there, but the X is just this extension, which means this language now is extending JavaScript. So you can do more inside it. Because with German JavaScript, you can't just mix HTML inside it. There is it's always pain to work with HTML inside JavaScript, and that's where this GSS comes in to simplify the process here. That and what is GSS? GSS is this JavaScript extension, which is some kind of a way of you defining your UI by using your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But the way it works is quite different from the normal HTML. Like the way you be typing some stuff here, it's quite different from the HTML. Even though some of the elements you be typing, it looks as if you are typing your normal HTML. But the way you interact with some of them is not the way you interact with normal HTML. So, and I'll be explaining different stuff that you can do with JSS. But the first thing you need to know is component, because that has the basic stuff. Component is the unit of your UI that you want to show to the user on the screen there. But nothing concerning React that you are using one component to represent everything on your page, or you can split them into different components, then you now use them. And that is when we talked about modules, because modules allow you to split your code in different files and you can import them inside each other. And as you can see here, we define what we want to show on the UI inside this app.jss, but we are now using it inside this main.js, which is the one that actually connected to the HTML page. So with the help of modules, you can split your code into different files so that it will be easier to manage there. Not that you just jam pack everything inside one file like that. But that doesn't mean you can't create multiple components inside a single file. What is just component? Or when you're talking about functional component, yeah, functional component. A functional component is just a function that returns a JSS code. A functional component is just any function that returns JSS code. Once you create a function and that function is returning anything JSX, then it is referred to as a component there. But what is JSX? What is JSS? This is the extension, which is the language that you use to describe your UI. So I want to display button, I want to have text, I want to have image at this particular place. But this one now, it's extending JavaScript to incorporate HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together. But there's a lot of things that you're going to be doing with JSX. So under the JSX, we have the JSS expression. So we have the JSS expression like that. So we have the JSX element. And when I'm talking about the JSX element, they are all your normal HTML elements that you know. So this one now, this is a JSX element. This P now is not just normal P that you know in the HTML. This is JSX element. Not that you say that it is a HTML element. Even though it is HTML element, but yeah, we call it JSX element. Because the way JSX extension is the language on itself. But inside the language, you have expression, you have element, and you have a lot of other things. But the major thing that you always be using are these two here, which is this expression and element. What is element? This P tag you are seeing here is JSX element. So the div you are seeing here is JSX element and so forth like that. So sometimes we just say HTML, but it's actually JSX, because the way you represent things here is not the same way they are doing in the normal HTML there like that. And if you look at it, what is going on here is what we refer to as expression, just like normal JavaScript expression. What is expression? Expression is just anything that can return a value. So when you just say expression, expression is just anything that can return a value. So one of them is you carrying out maybe operation there. Maybe you are adding two numbers together, or you are calling a function, or you are doing anything. They will always return back a value to use. For example, here now, if I go to the dev tools, we can particularize all this in there like that. For example, here, if I go to the console, and from the console, I can do 3 plus 2 here, or whatever I want to do. This is what we call expression here. What I just did here is what we call expression, because it's returning what? A value. So whatever operation that you carried out and it's returning a value, we call that everything on that line expression. So this 3 plus 3 here is an expression. Yeah, like that. So, and we have statement too. So inside statement, that's where you have expression. So entire stuff here is a statement. Statement is just action. You are telling this thing to do something. But if that thing is returning a value, we call it expression. So anything that returns value is known as a expression there like that. And if you look at this one too, this VIX logo that this thing is calling is going to return something there. And whatever that is returned, that's what is going to use that the JSS is going to use for this source here. So what is expression? Expression is anything that can return value in your code there like that. So for example here now, inside this same code here, I can just open this one here and I do 2 plus 2, and if I save it, before you get to the browser, you see that the React is going to calculate everything and then to return the value. And whatever that thing is now returning is what the React will now use at that particular place there like that, because I'm dealing with expression. Anytime you are dealing with expression, you always put them in this curly brace. Once you have curly brace, JSS is going to treat it as a JavaScript code, and whatever you are doing there needs to return a value. Whatever you must do there needs to return value. So it can be anything. For example, I can just build testing here. This one too will still be returned back. So this one is an expression there. Anything that return value is expression. And if you see now, you see that it is showing. Because here now, if I just if I just testing, you see that it will return that text back. Anytime that returns a value is known as expression. And whatever you be putting inside curly brace must be something that is returning a value. And whatever that thing returns, that's what you are going to see on the page. But anytime you want to do anything related to JavaScript, you must make sure that you are using JSS expression. Because here you can't just come like this, so you can't just say 3 plus 3. It will not interpret this one for you. It will just see it as normal text. So if I save it and we go back to the page, you see that the same way we type it, that same way it's showing on the screen there. It's not changing anything. It's just showing it to us. What's going on? It's just showing it to us like the way it is there, the way you type it. But if you want this thing now to evaluate it as a JavaScript code for you, you need to use JSX expression. And what is expression here? To make anything to be an expression, you use this curly brace, and inside the curly brace, you do whatever JavaScript stuff you want to do there. You are in JavaScript world like that. Once you open that curly brace, everything you want to type there, it will treat it as normal JavaScript. And whatever stuff you are doing there, the value that that thing returns, that's what it's going to use on the page. It's converted to string and it's going to show it on the screen, which means whatever you are doing here must be something that can be changed to string. And what is string? Anything that is like text. So whatever you are doing here, it must be something that JSS can convert to string. So if I do something that it cannot convert to string, then it's going to give me error. For example, array, it can actually convert array. So I'm going to give you some of the expression that this thing can work with there, and some of them it cannot work with. So let me just leave them out. So some of the expression you can use here is just the arithmetic expression, which is what we've used before. For example, like 2 plus 3 or whatever stuff like that. It will work. Again, too, you can actually give it array of anything that JSS can interpret on the screen. For example, I can give it array of string. I can give it because it must know how it interpret all these value, because the way it works is not like so it can interpret number like 1, 3, whatever stuff like that. It can interpret true, it can interpret false. Just like the way it's going to display for true and false is different on the screen, because it must know what the thing will display even though you are typing it here. So anything that can return value, because here now if I come here, all these things we always return value. Let me just comment all this one out and let me be showing you, so that I think that one will be better like that. So when you're talking about the expression, let me create, where should I put it? So I think let me put it at the end here, and let me use H1 so that it can appear boldly there. So how do you create expression in JSS? You open curly brace, and whatever you are doing here must be something that JSS can display on the screen. What can the JSS display? It can display number. So because this one can be converted to string. So if I save it, you see that on the page we are seeing that 2, because once you type 2 is an expression. It will just return back that 2 for you. But that's not the only thing you can do there. I can actually add maybe 2 numbers together or do anything I want. It will still return it back. And if you save, as you can see, 2 plus 7 is 9 like that. So it will return it because the result that you got from there is what you see on the screen, because it will interpret it like, and once you interpret it, the result, then you have it on the screen there. So this is something that can work again too. You know, anything that is compatible to string, it will display it. So which means you can show string too. But please, when you are dealing with expression, when you are dealing with GSS expression, and you want to deal with string, you have to put them in a quote. When you are outside of expression, just type it the way you want. This is a string. This is how you do it when you are not dealing with expression. But once you enter the expression word, then like that GSS expression, if you have a string, you must put it in a code, because whatever you are doing inside that curly brace, it's going to interpret it as normal JavaScript code. So if you want to type string here, it must be in a single quote or double quote on the back tick that we talked about. If I just say this is a string, as you can see, the way it's showing it, it's quite different from the normal way. And if I save it, you see that things will not work again because I'm doing something wrong here. Because anything that have to be in the curly brace have to be something that it can interpret, or it's a valid JavaScript code. And as you can see now, it's complaining that I'm doing something wrong there. So in order for this thing to work, we need to convert it to a proper string. If you are not inside expression, just type your text the way you normally type it. But once you enter expression line like this for the JSX, you must do your normal JavaScript code. Oh. Don't forget it's combining HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together. But the way it's doing it is quite different from the normal way you do with your file there. So when you are dealing with JavaScript, you are inside the curly brace word like that. So please, when you are dealing with components, what is component? Component is a reusable block of code of the UI that you are showing to your user there like that. But how do you create a component? To create a component, you create a function, and that function will now be returning a JSS code. So whenever you are now returning a JSS code, inside that your JSS code, you can do your normal HTML, you can do your normal JavaScript. But the way we represent them is quite different from the way you do it in the normal separation of file. You know, you create your JavaScript file, you create your HTML file, and you create your CSS file. But now we are joining them together, even though you can still separate them. But right now, for start, we are joining them together. So what is now our GSX? Where are we returning GSX? As you can see here, this is the return. And whatever stuff that follows the return are there. That is the GSS code are there that you are returning from your component. For example, now imagine I want to create another component that just say I can create that component. So how do you create the component? You create a function, you give it whatever name you want to give it, and that name you are giving your function, that's the name of the component. Anytime you create a component, you need to give the function a name, and the name of the function is what we refer to as the component name, but that name is what you are going to be using it to call it later. Because if you look at it now, inside the main.jss, that's where the app is called, and it's called through its name there. So the same way here too, I want to create a component, and here I want to call it say I. So this is my component, but this thing is not component yet. Like this, it's just normal regular function in JavaScript. In order for it to turn to a component, you need to return JSS code. And what is JSS code? It can be any of these stuff that I mentioned here, which it can be expression or it can be JSX element. So when you are returning a JSS code, it can either be expression or it can be what? It can be element. For example, here now I can just return 2 plus 2. This is valid JSS here. So it's returning a particular stuff here like that. And why is it complaining here? So as you can see, it's telling me I've never used the stuff. But how does it know that I've never used it? It's because some of stuff there that have been set up. So this, you see this EF link here, is the one that will check your code and it will make sure that everything are okay. And one of the stuff that is looking for is whatever you declare, you must use it. So here we just declare this AI, it's not going to show on the screen like that. So if I save it, nothing will show on the screen because we are not using it here. And that's the reason why it's complaining here. But you don't even need to bother yourself. This is just like a development warning there, telling you that okay, you create this, as you can see, say I is declared, but it's never been read. So which means you've not used this your component. And if you don't use your component, there's no way you see it on the screen. So how do we use our component? You can only use your component with anything that is connected to the React. And luckily for us, our app has been connected already. So which means we can use this our new component that we just created now inside this our app component. Now that's the advantage of the component. One component can use another component. So how do you call a component? No, here now we've already defined a component. So the next thing is how do we call it? So to call a component, just go to where you want to use it and you call it the normal way you used to call your HTML tag, because component just behave like a tag that you are using from normal HTML. As you can see here, the app is being called. How is it being called? You see that it's being called like your normal HTML tag. So when you want to use your component, just go to anywhere you want it to be placed here. So if I want it to be placed at the top of everything here, so I just need to come here, then call your component. Don't forget, whatever name that you name your function, that's what you are going to use to call it like that. As you can see here now, I'm using the self closing tag, or it can be open and closing tag like that, and it will still work. So it doesn't care whether you do it like this or like that, but you are going to see later on when you need to do this one or when you need to do open and closing. But you can use any one of them, but there's some time that you only need this one, and there's some time you need that open and closing. But you can actually use any one of them, and this thing will not, as you can see at the top, is returning what you. So in your component, you are going to create a function, and whatever you are returning there is what the component is going to show on the screen there. And what I'm doing here is what we call JSX there. So because JSX consists of expression and this element, so you can either return expression or you can return element. It will stay accept because all of them will always work. But we don't just return simple stuff like this. You return a combination of different elements wired together, just like the way you can see it here. So that there is a div. Inside the div, you have the A, you have the image inside the A, and everything is coupled together according to the way you want the content to be displayed on the screen there. But you can return anything from your component. It can either be this JSX expression or this JSX element. So even though we are going to be using HTML element, but it's not technically HTML element, it is JSX element. But I will be calling it HTML. I will just say div, PE, and whatever stuff like that. But they are not technically normal HTML code. They are JSX code. But the tooling is going to convert it to a proper stuff that you are going to see on the screen there. And as you can see, before it sends the results to the browser, it evaluates everything first before sending it to the browser. But why am I not using curly brace here? You know, I told you that you always use curly brace before you do expression. It's because here now I'm not using any JSX element. So when you're not using JSX element, whatever you are doing here, it will still see it as normal JavaScript code. But once you type any JSX element, for example, like this p tag now, so inside this place now, you are not in JavaScript word again. You are now in normal HTML word. So which means whatever you type here, this is a normal HTML word like this. So if you do 2 plus 2, it will never interpret it for you. But when you are inside the element and you want to turn it to a JavaScript stuff, then you have to bring the curly brace. So when you are inside the element and you want it to do something for you, like you need to interpret a particular code for you, then you need to use like this one now. Since we are already inside the JSX element, it will not treat everything that is there as JavaScript. It will treat it as normal HTML. Don't forget you can intertwine the two together like that. So since it's treating this in as normal HTML code like that, and want this one to be JavaScript, then you need to convert it to expression. And now you convert it to expression, just open curly brace, and whatever is seen inside the curly brace, that's the JSX expression. And if I save it now, it will firstly evaluate it before sending the results to the browser. And what we just create here now is our first component. It's our first custom component, and this is what you'll be doing. You create different components and you bring them together according to the UI that you are trying to build there like that. So we have JSX, which is a JavaScript extension like that, which is a language that brings HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together. It is React that introduced this extension for us, and it's supported inside VS Code, which means it gives you autocomplete of JSX in here. Whatever you want to do with here now, it always give you autocomplete for the JSX. For example, here now, if I type class, you see that the class name is going to be part of what is bringing up. It's not really showing the class. What is showing is the class name, because VS Code knows that you are dealing with JSX code. And how does it know you are dealing with JSX code? It's because of the extension. So through the extension, he knows that you are dealing with JSS, and he knows that whatever you need to be suggesting for you here is all about JSS code, not the technically the JavaScript or the HTML or the CSS there. But you can put everything together and you are going to see what is going on there. So the class name now is what you can now use to give this element a particular class. For example, here, testing from React, like that. Where's my F? So testing from React, and if I save it, you see that it's going to give the class to this element, but nothing is happening because we did not style anything. It's just to showcase how the class is going to display there on the screen. And if I inspect this element, you see that the class name here, it will change it to class. In your HTML, can you see now? From the HTML, what you'll be seeing is class, but what you're actually typing is classing. And that's why I'm saying that this one is not technically the HTML that you know. This is JSX. But the tooling behind the scene will do all the magic and change it to the way the browser will understand what is going on here, like that. Your normal HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you still be using them, just that you're not combining them in a different way according to what the React is expecting from you. And what is he expecting for you? Is expecting component. And inside your component, whatever you want to display, you return it there, like that. So, and what are we returning from this component? We are returning this p tag, and inside the p tag we have this content. But inside the content too, we have expression inside it, which is this 2 plus 2 here, like that. Anything that React can interpret, just put it inside the expression and it's going to interpret it for you, like that. But the advantage of this component is that we can reuse it in multiple places. So which means someone here too, I can just call that same component again. So by just saying the say I, like this. But here now I'm going to use the other one, which is the open and close. You see that it will still work. But what we are having here, you see that that's the same thing we are going to have down here once this thing is done compiling. Can you see? We have it here, and we have it here. So if I need to make any changes to the code now, I don't need to touch this, and I don't need to touch this one here. I only go to the source where the code is coming from, make the changes, and you see that the changes will appear in those places that you are using your component. This is the advantage of this one now, not like the normal HTML that you have to be doing copy and paste. And if you need to make any changes, you do it at the top and you still go down and make the changes. But with this one now, you only create it once and you reuse it in different places. And if there's any changes that needs to be done, then you just make changes here and you see it there on the page. For example, here I can just duplicate them multiple times. So let me duplicate, and you see all of them coming out because they are component. And React doesn't care whether you use it for one, use it 2 times, use it 3 times, 4 times, doesn't care. Just place it where you want the content to show. React is going to put everything on the page. And here now I can just change it or by adding some content there. So update the, let me just say, let's update the components like this, or let me put the functional. So this is the name. So call it functional component because you are creating a component through a function. As you can see, it will update all of them because all of them are just copy of this component, and whenever you are using it, it will update all of them at once. And this is the advantage of component. Even though this is just the basic stuff, because at some time you want your component, it's one component, but you want it to behave in different way, which is one of the stuff I showed you last time when we are discussing about that side, the calendar stuff. You see that on that side, different section here, they are the same. The difference is just the way the content are being arranged. You know, the image is on the left, the content is on the right. But for other one, the content is on the right, the image is on the left. So how do you talk to your component to behave in different way? That's where props comes in. So we talk about components, The next thing we need to talk about is props. And what is props? Props is just the short form for properties, which is what you can send down to your component so that your component can behave in different ways. What are the properties that the component is expecting from you so that you can use it to determine how things are going to show on the screen? And what is props? Props is just the same thing as you passing attribute to your element. You know, from the HTML we call them attributes, which is what you use to add extra information to your tag. Here too, you can supply extra information to your component so that it can behave in a different way. And that extra information that you are supplying there is what we call props. So it's just another word for properties or for attribute. But in order for you to know, when you just say attribute now, everybody know that you are talking about normal HTML. When you now say props, everybody know that you are talking about component. So that's why they are not calling it attribute. So that by the time someone says something, before you even see what is going on, you already understand what that person is trying to pass across there. So that's the reason why we have a different name for it. But props is just the same thing as attribute that you have on your normal HTML there like that. But the way we do it is that props, you can think of props as just parameter that you are passing to your function there. So whatever you pass to your function, that's what we call props. But please, whatever you are going to be passing to your component is just one item that you can pass into it. But that one item can hold multiple items to the component. You can't pass two things. So here now, you can't do something like this: prop one, prop two, prop three, like this. You can, in a function, you can pass multiple attributes. But when you are dealing with React, it's only one thing that you can pass. But that one thing there can hold multiple properties because it's the React that will send it to this component, not you. It's the React that will call the function, and it's the one that will send all those properties down to it. And the way you send it is like to send it through the first whatever stuff you are using here, whatever parameter you are using, it will send everything. So every other thing here, they are not representing anything, no, they are just useless. So React will call your, anytime you call your component like this, later on, whatever attributes you pass into this one or whatever props you pass into it, your component is going to receive it through the first parameter that you supply here. And that parameter, we normally name it as this props. So you can use anything, but by convention, that this is what we use. It's not a must that you name it like this, but it's always good that you use this particular stuff like that. As you can see, that it's trying to generate something for me like that, which is something that I don't need because this is what. So props here, you can call it in anything you want. If you like, call it X, call it Y. We have to send everything down into it, but that's bad because if you are working with other people, you are confusing them like that because we have the way we used to work, and anybody that sees that stuff already know what is going on. But you, if you are not changing it to another thing, you'll be confusing other developer that you'll be working with there. So we normally call it these props, and these props is the one that will hold all the properties that you are sending down to this component. For example, here now I can console log it out. Please, you can do anything related to JavaScript before you return your CSS. But I've not explained that one. But for now, yeah, before you get to this return part, you can do anything related to JavaScript. But once you enter this return side, then you are dealing with GSS. But whatever you have before this return, that's pure JavaScript. No this in there like that. Even though you can still use component there, but whatever you are doing here is just normal JavaScript. And that is why you see that I can use the console, the normal JavaScript stuff. And what did I want to console log out? I want to console log out these props, which is whatever the user is sending to this component. But right now, I need to disable other one so that you don't get confused because each one of them are going to receive their own props. Don't forget, I have one here, and I have which other one? I have one, two, three, four, like this. So React is going to call all of them separately, even though they are sharing the same component. They are different from each other, and that's what we want to do because we want to make each one of them to behave in a different way. So each one of them are going to be called with their own props, even though they are sharing the same component. But the way the props will be sent down is depending on the way you call them inside your code there like that. So I'm going to disable other one so that we can only focus on one because each one of them will be called with their own stuff and you might get confused about this thing. So let me just have only one like this. And if I console, if I go to the this thing, what you are going to see is undefined because we are not sending any props. So right now we are not sending any props, but we are receiving it. And JavaScript, I mean the React, we just null or undefined because I am not sending anything to it. So if I go to the console like that, clear all this thing, and let me reload, because you can see that it's calling them multiple types of all those on that. But right now, can you see that it is empty like that? Why is it empty? It's telling you that you are not sending any props to this. Where you are using that component, oh, you are not sending any props. So how do you send props? The way you pass attributes to your element, that's the same way you send down props to any. You know, they behave like element, even though they are not element, because you call them as if you are calling element. So here too, you can send down props by using the attribute method. So here now, I'm going to have prop one, and the one creating into. So here, what's the value? It's just going to be a normal string, because you know, if it is JSX, you have to put it in curly braces. But here, just to be testing one like that. Again, you can supply multiple props. Maybe, for example, the color. So whatever I send here, that's what is going to use as color there. So the color should be red, and again the background should be orange. So everything I am sending to this component here is what we call props, and React is going to pick all of them and send it down to this your component through these props. And the props is just an object that holds everything that you pass into it. So if I save it now, you see that everything that we are passing to that component, we are going to be getting them. Can you see it now? So the component will now be getting them. So can you see the name of the props? That's what is going to use as the key. While the value you pass in there, that's what is just passed as value. So props is a way of you extending your component to behave in different way there like that. For example, let me just remove this props one and only leave this color and background alone, or let me even use BG, because whatever name you use here, that's what is going to send out. So since we have color and BG, the only two things we now have there now is color and BG. It's only what you send down, that is with the only one you pass here, that the React is going to send down to your component. And how do you receive it? You receive it through this props here. And this props is an object that will hold all the properties that you are sending down to that component. So how do you have access to them? You know, this thing is object. You know how to work with objects. So if I want to access the color now, what I can just do here, for example here, I can just use the style. I'll explain this better later on. I can just say color like this. Color is going to be props dot color like this. So whatever you send in as this thing, well, if you don't send color, then it's going to use blue by default. And the background, I will explain this in better. It's going to be props dot bg, and if you're not sending anything for bg, it's going to use yellow by default. And if I save it now, you see that this element is going to have background of that stuff. Why is it having that background of yellow? Is because that's what orange is, because that's what I send down to it. And if I change it maybe to green like this, you see that it will change, because you are the one sending that information down to the component, which means this component now I can reuse it, and I can change some of the property there, which means the color now, I don't want it to be this, I want it to be white, and I want the background to be blue. And if I save it now, it will generate another one, but now this one is behaving in another way, even though it's the same component that you are calling, but because of that property that you are sending down, the component is behaving in different way there. So props is what you can use to change the behavior of your component, and we're going to be talking more about all these in the next classes. So I'll have to stop.